The arrival of the unseen. In a forgotten corner of human-colonized space, nestled among dense forests and rugged terrain, lay the outpost of Verdun. This small settlement, surrounded by towering trees that stretched into an almost impenetrable canopy, was home to a handful of settlers who had sought refuge from the chaos of central colonies. Here, life was simple yet unforgiving. Miners, engineers, and biologists coexisted in a routine that rarely deviated from mundane tasks. For many, this isolation was a welcome escape, a chance to reconnect with nature and leave behind the frenetic pace of urban life. However, on one fateful evening, this peace was shattered. It began as a low rumble in the distance, a sound that resonated through the ground beneath their feet. The settlers paused in their daily routines, exchanging nervous glances as they speculated about its origin. Initially dismissing it as another earthquake, a common occurrence in this tectonically active region, they soon realized that something far stranger was unfolding. A streak of brilliant light shot across the sky, illuminating the darkening horizon with an otherworldly glow. It descended rapidly toward the forest, leaving behind a fiery trail that sparked both awe and fear among those who witnessed it. As it crashed into the dense woods with a thunderous roar, a shockwave rippled through Verdun, rattling windows and sending tremors through their very foundations. A plume of black smoke rose into the air, casting an ominous shadow over their tranquil lives. Stunned silence enveloped the outpost for several moments before panic set in. Reports flooded into the communications station. Claims ranged from an alien invasion to military tests gone awry. Speculation ran rampant among settlers who had lived in relative peace for so long. The town's governing council convened quickly but found themselves at a loss for how to respond. They dispatched a drone to investigate but lost its signal mere minutes later. "That's no ordinary ship," muttered one technician, his voice trembling with anxiety. "Something's wrong out there." After hours of debate filled with uncertainty and fear, they reluctantly agreed to send a small armed reconnaissance team into the forest to assess the situation. As night fell and time dragged on without word from the team, tension thickened in Verdun like fog rolling in over a lake. Whispers circulated about legends, the tales of original settlers who had vanished without a trace centuries ago, adding an air of dread to their already fraught atmosphere. For D.N.E. Malik, however, this was not just another day in Verdun. It was a moment he had long awaited. Unlike most settlers who were focused on mining or engineering tasks, D.N.E. was a freelance xenobiologist driven by an insatiable curiosity about life beyond Earth. He had come to Grace 5 not merely for refuge but for discovery. The chance to encounter extraterrestrial intelligence had always been his dream. As he prepared his equipment, a backpack filled with devices designed for fieldwork, his heart raced with anticipation. He understood that this could be humanity's most significant moment, first contact with an alien species. The thrill outweighed any fear he felt about potential dangers lurking in the unknown. Just as he finished packing his gear, there came a knock at his door. It was Commander Riggs, leader of Verdun's security force, a man built like a brick wall, whose demeanor often matched his physique. "You're not thinking about going out there, are you?" Riggs asked, concern etched across his face. D.N.E. glanced at his pack by the door and shrugged nonchalantly. "Of course I am. This could be our moment, the chance to communicate with another form of life." Riggs shook his head vehemently. "You're a damn fool if you think it's that simple. We've already lost a drone and a team out there. Whatever that ship is, it's not like anything we've seen before." "I understand your concern," D.N.E. replied earnestly, "but we can't just sit here doing nothing. What if they need help? What if they're trying to communicate?" After a long pause filled with unspoken tension, Riggs sighed heavily. "I can't stop you. But if you go out there and don't come back, I won't be sending anyone after you." D.N.E. nodded solemnly. He understood what was at stake. With Riggs' departure leaving him alone once more in his dimly lit lab, D.N.E. gathered his thoughts while double-checking his gear one last time. The excitement coursing through him now mingled with anxiety. The unknown loomed ahead like an uncharted territory, filled with both promise and peril. Stepping outside into the cold night air sent shivers down his spine as he began his trek toward the crash site, illuminated only by his handheld scanner's faint beam. The forest felt eerily silent. Even nature seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. After about an hour of navigating through dense underbrush and towering trees, he finally reached what remained of the ship, a massive structure half buried in earth and debris. Its exterior shimmered under moonlight, with iridescent hues that shifted colors as if alive, an otherworldly sight that filled him with awe. As he approached cautiously, he noticed strange symbols etched into its surface, glowing faintly against dark metal, indicating advanced technology far beyond human capabilities. His breath caught in his throat as he reached out tentatively to touch it, surprisingly warm against his fingers. Suddenly, a low guttural growl erupted from deep within the ship, a sound that sent chills racing down his spine as every instinct screamed at him to turn back. Yet curiosity anchored him in place. He couldn't leave now, not when he was so close to uncovering something monumental. With cautious determination fueling him forward, DNE took another deep breath before navigating around what appeared to be a breach in the hull, an opening large enough for him to climb through. Inside lay chaos, a maze of twisted metal wires and shattered technology, illuminated by flickering sparks casting eerie shadows across walls adorned with claw-like marks, as if something had dragged itself through wreckage. Then came another growl, this time closer, followed by heavy labored breathing that echoed ominously throughout the corridor ahead. DNE's throat went dry as he pressed onward despite mounting fear. What awaited him inside could change everything he believed about life beyond Earth. He encountered. The ship's low guttural growl reverberated in the very air around DNE Malik, freezing him in place. His outstretched hand lingered on the shimmering hull of the alien vessel, a sensation of warmth radiating from it. He had envisioned many scenarios upon discovering an extraterrestrial craft, perhaps a cold, lifeless wreck or a technologically advanced ship brimming with data to analyze. But this primal sound was not part of his calculations. Something alive was inside. His heart raced as he withdrew his hand from the warm metal, instinctively taking a step back. The forest surrounding him felt darker and more oppressive, as if the crash site itself were a living entity, watching his every move. DNE's rational mind urged him to flee, to escape the unknown dangers lurking within. Yet another part of him, the part that yearned for discovery, held him captive. He couldn't leave now, he was so close. Taking a deep breath, DNE steadied his nerves and reached into his pack for his handheld scanner, a device designed to detect biological and technological signals. As the scanner powered up, its soft blue light illuminated the ship's surface, casting eerie shadows around him. The display flickered momentarily before settling on a reading. Faint but unmistakable life signs emanated from within the vessel. His pulse quickened. His hypothesis had been validated. There were living beings inside this ship. But how many? What kind of life forms were they? The scanner provided no answers to those questions, leaving DNE with only speculation as he cautiously approached the breach in the hull. The jagged opening gaped like a mouth ready to swallow him whole. He peered inside, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The interior resembled a chaotic landscape of twisted metal wires and shattered technology. Sparks flickered from broken panels, casting eerie shadows across the walls. But what drew DNE's attention were deep claw-like marks etched into the floor and walls, evidence that something or someone had dragged itself through the wreckage. The growling sound echoed again, closer this time, followed by heavy labored breathing that filled the corridor with an unsettling rhythm. DNE swallowed hard, fear gripped him, yet he pressed on, forcing himself to climb through the breach and into the ship. His boots crunched on debris as he navigated through the wreckage. Every few steps, his flashlight flickered erratically, its energy disrupted by the ship's strange materials. The further he ventured inside, the colder it became, an unnatural chill seeped into the air, as if warmth itself had been leached away. Then he saw it, a massive figure slumped against the wall at the far end of the corridor. Even from this distance, DNE could tell that it was enormous, at least 8 feet tall, its body covered in a sleek dark exoskeleton that shimmered with iridescent hues reminiscent of the ship's exterior. Its limbs were long and powerful, ending in sharp claws that looked capable of inflicting severe damage. But it was its face that captivated him most. Strange insectoid features adorned with multiple eyes, some cracked and leaking a thick dark fluid. The creature was injured. DNE froze. His breath caught in his throat as he observed its labored breathing filling the corridor with an agonizing rhythm. For a fleeting moment their eyes locked, a connection formed through mutual vulnerability. This was no invader or hostile conqueror. It was merely a creature in pain. Cautiously lowering his flashlight and taking a step forward, DNE was met with another growl from the alien. But this time it was weaker, less aggressive, a warning rather than an attack. He raised his hands in a gesture of peace, hoping to convey that he meant no harm. "I'm here to help," he said softly, though he wasn't certain if the creature could understand him. "I'm a biologist. I can treat your wounds if you let me." The alien remained motionless, its many eyes watching him with weariness and exhaustion. DNE could see tension coiling in its massive frame. Its claws dug into the metal floor as if preparing for one last desperate defense. It was scared, cornered like a wounded animal. DNE slowly approached it, careful to keep his movements deliberate and non-threatening. His mind raced through possibilities. This creature was unlike anything he had ever studied before. Yet its physiology seemed similar enough to other carbon-based life forms he had encountered in his research. Kneeling a few feet away from the alien, DNE set his pack down on the floor and retrieved his medkit. The creature's eyes followed every movement he made but showed no signs of aggression. It seemed too weak to do anything but watch him intently. Hoping the medkit revealed an array of tools and vials, filled with regenerative compounds designed for various species biology. He pulled out a syringe filled with a cocktail meant to accelerate healing processes, a blend of nutrients and cellular stimulants tailored for carbon-based life forms. With careful precision, DNE filled the syringe while keeping an eye on the alien's reactions. He could see its breaths coming in shallow gasps. It needed help but remained wary of him. "Please," he murmured softly as he approached again, "I'm not here to hurt you." He held out the syringe cautiously so it could see what he intended to do. The alien blinked slowly. Some eyes remained half-lidded while others flared wide open in surprise or perhaps curiosity. It seemed to recognize that DNE posed no immediate threat, at least not one it could perceive as dangerous at that moment. DNE took another deep breath before injecting the serum into one of its larger wounds, a gash along its side that oozed dark fluid mixed with some kind of viscous substance resembling oil. As soon as he did so, something remarkable happened. An almost imperceptible shimmer spread across its exoskeleton where he'd injected it. For several tense moments nothing happened. Then gradually DNE noticed subtle changes. The creature's breathing began to stabilize slightly as if responding positively to treatment. "Stay with me," he urged gently while preparing another dose for another wound nearby, a deep puncture mark that looked particularly severe. As he worked meticulously on treating its injuries one by one, each injection accompanied by whispered reassurances, the atmosphere shifted around them. What had begun as fear transformed into something more profound. Understanding blossomed between them like fragile flowers breaking through cracked concrete. DNE felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility wash over him. This creature had been cast aside by fate, yet here they were together. Two beings from vastly different worlds caught in an extraordinary moment forged by necessity and compassion. Finally finishing with his initial round of treatment, DNE leaned back slightly surveying his work, while also gauging how much strength remained within this magnificent being before him. Its eyes, now glimmering faintly under moonlight filtering through broken panels above them, spoke volumes about their shared experience thus far. "What's your name?" DNE asked softly, even knowing full well that communication might be impossible given their differences, but somehow believing deep down that connection transcended language barriers entirely. In response came another low growl, but this time softer, almost melodic, like an echo reverberating off distant mountains, rather than threatening growls meant for intimidation purposes alone. It seemed almost like music resonating through space itself, binding them together beyond mere words spoken aloud between two vastly different species, united by circumstance alone. DNE smiled despite himself, feeling hope surge within him at this unexpected turn events had taken since arriving here tonight. Perhaps they could find common ground after all. But just then, a loud crash echoed outside, followed by frantic shouts piercing through silence surrounding them, causing both creatures' hearts to race anew. "What was that?" DNE whispered urgently, glancing back toward entrance, where shadows danced ominously against walls illuminated only by flickering lights overhead. The alien's eyes widened, instinctively sensing danger approaching rapidly, drawing closer, threatening their fragile alliance formed under duress moments ago. "We need to move," DNE exclaimed, rising quickly, readying himself for whatever lay ahead. With newfound determination coursing through veins, they prepared together, facing unknown challenges lurking beyond walls, separating them from freedom, a fragile alliance. The atmosphere inside the alien ship was thick with tension as DNE Malik knelt before the injured creature, his heart pounding in his chest. The alien's multiple eyes blinked slowly, each one reflecting a mixture of fear and exhaustion. DNE could sense that time was of the essence. If he didn't act quickly, this magnificent being might not survive. With careful precision, he withdrew a syringe filled with a regenerative cocktail designed to accelerate healing processes. The serum was formulated for carbon-based life forms, but he had no way of knowing if it would work on this alien physiology. Still, he had to try. "Please," he murmured softly, "I'm not here to hurt you." He held the syringe out in front of him, hoping to convey his intentions through simple gestures and soothing words. "I want to help." The creature's eyes narrowed slightly, as if weighing his sincerity against its instinctual fear. DNE felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He was acutely aware of how precarious this moment was. If it perceived him as a threat, all hope for cooperation could vanish in an instant. After what felt like an eternity, the alien shifted slightly, its massive frame relaxing just enough for DNE to recognize a glimmer of trust. He took that as a sign and leaned closer, gently injecting the serum into one of its larger wounds, a deep gash along its side that oozed dark fluid mixed with something resembling oil. As soon as the serum entered its bloodstream, an almost imperceptible shimmer spread across the alien's exoskeleton where he'd injected it. DNE's breath caught in his throat as he watched the creature's breathing stabilize slightly. It seemed to respond positively to the treatment. "Stay with me," he urged, feeling a surge of hope. He quickly prepared another dose for another wound, a deep puncture mark that looked particularly severe, while keeping an eye on the alien's reactions. With every injection, DNE felt more connected to this being. They were both trapped in this moment, two creatures from vastly different worlds, caught in an extraordinary circumstance shaped by pain and necessity. As he worked meticulously on treating its injuries one by one, he whispered reassurances, believing that connection transcended language barriers entirely. Finally finishing with his initial round of treatment, DNE leaned back slightly to survey his work while gauging how much strength remained within this magnificent being before him. The alien's eyes now glimmered faintly under the flickering lights above them, an unspoken bond formed through shared vulnerability. "What's your name?" DNE asked softly, even knowing full well that communication might be impossible given their differences, but somehow believing deep down that connection could be forged through empathy and understanding. In response came another low growl, but this time softer and almost melodic, like an echo reverberating off distant mountains, rather than threatening growls meant for intimidation purposes alone. It seemed almost like music resonating through space itself, binding them together beyond mere words, spoken aloud between two vastly different species, united by circumstance alone. DNE smiled despite himself, feeling hope surge within him at this unexpected turn events had taken since arriving here tonight. Perhaps they could find common ground after all. But just then, a loud crash echoed outside, followed by frantic shouts, piercing through silence surrounding them, causing both creatures' hearts to race anew. "What was that?" DNE whispered urgently, glancing back toward entrance, where shadows danced ominously against walls, illuminated only by flickering lights overhead. The alien's eyes widened instinctively, sensing danger approaching rapidly, drawing closer, threatening their fragile alliance, formed under duress moments ago. "We need to move," DNE exclaimed, rising quickly, readying himself for whatever lay ahead. As they prepared together, facing unknown challenges lurking beyond walls, separating them from freedom, DNE felt a rush of adrenaline course through him. The stakes had escalated dramatically. He gestured for the alien to follow him as they navigated deeper into the ship's wreckage. The corridor twisted and turned like a labyrinth. Every step brought them closer to either salvation or peril. The sounds outside grew louder. Shouts mingled with mechanical whirs and thuds that hinted at approaching danger. "Stay close," DNE instructed, glancing back at the creature who now seemed more alert than before. Its massive form moved with surprising grace despite its injuries. There was an undeniable strength in its presence that both intimidated and fascinated him. They reached what appeared to be a central chamber within the ship, a vast space filled with broken technology and glowing panels that flickered erratically. The air was thick with smoke and debris. It was clear that whatever had caused the crash had also left chaos in its wake. DNE scanned the room for potential escape routes, while keeping an eye on the entrance behind them. He could hear voices growing nearer, human voices filled with urgency and fear. "Damn it, where is everyone?" shouted one voice, followed by another commanding tone barking orders. "We need to secure the perimeter," came another shout. Panic surged within DNE. They were running out of time. He turned back to the alien beside him, whose eyes were wide with confusion but also of determination, a reflection of his own resolve. "Listen," D&E said urgently, "we need to find a way out of here. Can you move?" The creature nodded slightly, though its movements were still labored from its injuries. D&E felt a pang of guilt. He wished he could do more to ease its suffering before they faced whatever awaited them outside. Suddenly, a loud crash reverberated through the chamber as soldiers burst into view. Armed men clad in protective gear flooded into the room, their weapons drawn and aimed at anything that moved. "There, secure that thing," one soldier shouted as they spotted D&E and the alien huddled together amidst the wreckage. D&E's heart raced as he instinctively stepped in front of the creature, raising his hands in surrender even though fear gripped him tightly. "Wait, don't shoot," he shouted desperately. "It's not hostile, it needs help." But his pleas fell on deaf ears as chaos erupted around them. The soldiers exchanged confused glances before one of them shouted back angrily, "Get away from it. That thing is dangerous." "No," D&E cried out again, but knew time was slipping away fast. They would have to act quickly if they wanted any chance at survival. In a split-second decision, fueled by adrenaline and instinctual loyalty towards this wounded being beside him, the very embodiment of everything he had ever dreamed about, D&E grabbed hold of its arm, urging it forward toward an exit near the far wall. "Follow me," he yelled over the din as they dashed toward freedom amidst gunfire erupting behind them. The alien moved surprisingly fast despite its injuries. Together they sprinted toward what appeared to be an emergency hatch leading outside into darkness beyond. As they reached it just in time, D&E felt hope surge within him once more. Their escape was imminent, but only if they could make it past those who sought to capture or destroy what they did not understand. The threat from above. D&E Malik stood frozen, the medkit clutched tightly in his hands as he faced the injured alien. The creature's many eyes blinked slowly, each one reflecting a mix of fear and exhaustion. D&E could sense that time was of the essence. If he didn't act quickly, this magnificent being might not survive. "Stay with me," he urged softly, his voice barely above a whisper. He carefully prepared the syringe, filled with a regenerative serum, hoping against hope that it would work on this alien physiology. The creature's labored breathing filled the silence, its massive frame trembling slightly as it seemed to gauge his intentions. With a deep breath, D&E injected the serum into one of the larger wounds, a gash along its side that oozed dark fluid mixed with something resembling oil. Almost immediately, an iridescent shimmer spread across its exoskeleton where he'd injected it. D&E felt a rush of hope, perhaps he could save it. As he continued to treat its injuries, the alien's breathing began to stabilize, and its eyes flickered with a faint glimmer of recognition. It was responding to his care, and for a moment, they shared an unspoken understanding, a bond forged in vulnerability and desperation. But just as D&E finished administering the last dose, chaos erupted outside the ship. A loud crash echoed through the corridor, followed by frantic shouts that pierced the tense atmosphere. "Secure the perimeter," shouted a voice from outside, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of heavy boots stomping through the wreckage. D&E's heart raced as he realized that their time was running out. Soldiers were closing in on them, armed and ready for confrontation. He turned to the alien beside him, whose eyes widened instinctively at the sound of approaching danger. "We need to move," D&E exclaimed urgently, grabbing the creature's arm and urging it to follow him deeper into the ship. They had to find an escape route before they were discovered. Navigating through the twisted wreckage, D&E felt adrenaline coursing through his veins. The soldiers outside were shouting orders, their voices growing louder as they searched for any signs of life within the strange vessel. "Get away from it. That thing is dangerous," one soldier yelled as they burst into view at the entrance of the ship. "No," D&E shouted back, raising his hands in surrender even though panic gripped him tightly. "It's not hostile, it needs help." But his pleas fell on deaf ears as chaos erupted around them. The soldiers exchanged confused glances before one of them shouted back angrily, "Move aside. We'll take care of it." D&E could feel despair creeping in. They were outnumbered and outgunned. He had to think fast. With no time to waste, he grabbed hold of the alien's arm again and pulled it toward an emergency hatch he had spotted earlier, a potential escape route leading outside into darkness beyond. "Follow me," he yelled over the din as they sprinted toward freedom amidst gunfire erupting behind them. Just as they reached the hatch, a soldier shouted from behind them, "Stop right there." D&E's heart sank, They had no choice but to act quickly. He flung open the hatch and motioned for the alien to follow him into the night air beyond. The moment they stepped outside, D&E was met with a cacophony of sounds, the hum of machinery mixed with shouts from soldiers who were now frantically searching for them. The forest loomed ahead like an impenetrable wall of darkness, but it was their only chance for survival. Go! D&E urged as they plunged into the dense underbrush together. The alien moved surprisingly fast despite its injuries. There was an undeniable strength in its presence that both intimidated and fascinated him. As they ran through the forest, branches whipped against their bodies and leaves crunched beneath their feet. D&E's mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. Would they be pursued? Would anyone come looking for them? He felt a surge of determination. He couldn't let fear dictate their fate. After what felt like an eternity of running through darkness, they finally came upon a small clearing illuminated by moonlight filtering through the trees. D&E halted abruptly and turned to face the alien beside him. "We need to hide," he said breathlessly, scanning their surroundings for any signs of danger. The creature nodded slightly, its many eyes darting around as if assessing their surroundings too. Together, they crouched behind a large boulder covered in moss, an unlikely sanctuary amidst chaos. As silence enveloped them in that momentary reprieve, D&E took stock of their situation. They were alive but still in grave danger. Soldiers would be searching for them relentlessly. "What do we do now?" he whispered to himself more than to his companion. But before he could ponder further, rustling noises echoed from behind them, footsteps drawing closer. D&E held his breath as shadows danced across the clearing. Soldiers were searching every inch of this forest. He glanced at his companion. The alien's eyes reflected fear, but also resolve. It was ready to fight if necessary. Suddenly, one soldier broke away from the group and approached their hiding spot cautiously. D&E's heart raced. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, but there was nowhere left to go. In that moment of desperation, something incredible happened. The alien emitted a low hum that resonated through the air around them like music vibrating through space itself. The soldier paused mid-step, as if entranced by this unexpected sound. Confusion washed over his face while others continued searching blindly, unaware of what lay just beyond their reach. "Did you hear that?" he muttered under his breath, glancing around uncertainly. Seizing this opportunity, D&E whispered urgently, "Now, we have to move." Together they slipped away from their hiding place and darted deeper into the woods just as another soldier called out behind them, "Over here, I think I saw something." With renewed urgency coursing through him, they pressed onward, weaving between trees until exhaustion threatened to take hold. Finally reaching another clearing, this one larger than before, they collapsed onto soft grass, panting heavily, while surveying their surroundings cautiously for any signs of pursuit. "We can't stay here long," D&E said between breaths, glancing at his companion, who seemed equally fatigued yet determined. But just then, a low rumble echoed above them. A massive ship appeared overhead, cutting through clouds like a predator stalking its prey. "Look!" D&E pointed upward, feeling dread wash over him. This was no ordinary military vessel. It bore markings unlike anything seen before. The alien beside him tensed, visibly sensing danger approaching rapidly, drawing closer, threatening everything they had fought so hard for thus far. "We need cover," D&E urged, urgently scanning for nearby trees or rocks large enough to hide behind. They scrambled towards some thick bushes, just as beams of light began scanning across ground, illuminating everything in sight. "Stay low," he whispered fiercely, feeling adrenaline surge within him once more. This was their last chance. As they huddled together beneath foliage, a sense of camaraderie blossomed between them, forged by shared experiences against overwhelming odds. And then came another voice from above, a commanding tone booming through speakers, echoing ominously, "This is your final warning. Surrender now or face consequences." D&E felt fear grip him tightly, but alongside it blossomed something else, determination fueled by hope. He would not abandon this creature, nor allow fear dictate their fate any longer. Together, he whispered softly, glancing at his companion, whose many eyes locked onto his own, filled with understanding, "We'll find a way out." With newfound resolve coursing through both beings, they waited patiently beneath cover, readying themselves for whatever lay ahead, determined not just survive, but thrive against all odds together, united by purpose alone.